I know it's kind of a two sides. There's a lot of two sidesism that happens in our culture as a whole, but there's a two sidesism to this data part of football. I like both sides. I like that people go with their gut and they try to make. We've talked about Dan Campbell and his fourth down calls on the show previously, and and how they're a little bit of a combination between the two concepts. But I like knowing the data because there's a lot of trends that people don't necessarily understand in the data, and hey, if you can help understand it, might help however you view the game. Maybe you like to bet. That's not my thing, and we don't talk about betting too much on the show, but maybe that's where you like to apply it, or fantasy football, or just being a more informed viewer. So, but it's a good thing to look at. One of the things that I thought was interesting that you shared recently on your X account was the fact that I don't think this is being talked about enough, because a lot of people are looking at the Lions last season. They're saying, okay, 15-2 last season. They're looking good. They've got the injury bug hasn't bit quite as much this year. They should be getting a lot of reinforcements back. They had a decent off season, but I think people are not really looking at the schedule strength as much. I know it's early to look at that, but you shared a graphic that I found interesting. I think it was it related to betting, but it had the NFC North, and it only had one team projected to win double digits. It was the Lions, but it was barely over 10 wins, and everybody else was below that. Those guys could beat each other up and beat the other divisions up, because especially the Lions, they're playing the NFC East, the AFC East, and then the number ones for all the other divisions. So this is going to be quite the grueling schedule here for them. So I thought that was interesting that you shared that to try to kind of temper people's expectations.
For sure, yeah. I think like that graphic that I shared, which I believe came from Sebastian, Mr. KSP, is a great follow, and helps create a lot of the different data sets that we use to do these analysis. And like his research showed, it was not necessarily about betting, but more so using the betting markets as sort of this wisdom of the crowd heuristic to tell us, based on sort of looking at everyone else's opinions and looking at everyone's bet, using that to inform what like a projected win total and therefore also projected strength of schedule based on everyone's projected win total should be. And yeah, I mean, there's no division I don't think in football that you can say is as competitive as the NFC North right now. I mean, it's just like. I think the Bears are scary in their own way of there's probably a lot more volatility there just because of, we all obviously understand how strong of a coach Ben Johnson is, but, we also know that there's one, they're the Bears, and two, there's a lot to be desired with Caleb Williams and what he may or may not be at this point. But, I mean, the other three teams, the Packers, the Vikings, I mean, again, I guess Vikings have a lot of uncertainty because of J.J. McCarthy, but these are all really strong teams. That the defense is going to be good in Minnesota. The Packers are going to be good year in, year out. So this is going to be, I think it's really fun to watch those games. It's going to be a fight to the death, but I would not be surprised if, the Lions still turn out a season, especially considering how they performed with all the health issues, as you mentioned last year, that, maybe it isn't 15-2, but we're still I think, I'd still say they're the strong favorite to win the division and probably the second favorite behind the Eagles to win the conference. So a lot to, still feel confident about, despite what is true that they might have one of the hardest strengths of schedule in football, I'd say, behind maybe the Giants.
That's why I wanted to talk about that, because I think people are going to have to temper their expectations a little bit. And if they look at it and say, oh, only 11 wins this year, that's not as good. It's not necessarily true, especially pending the health headed into the playoffs. You might have a little bit more of a grueling schedule, but the way they were headed into the playoffs, it was going to be a tough run there no matter how they cut it, even with the bye, and even though they only had the two losses. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. We do a lot of counter intel previews here and reviews with other writers each week, whoever they play. And when we talk to the folks in the division, it's going to be interesting to talk with each of those teams, because I can really see a world in which kind of all scenarios happen. It's hard to see a definitive bottom team. I could see a world. There's a lot of power rankings that talk about the Packers being the number one team in the division. I know that a lot of Lions fans don't like that, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I could see them being the worst team in the division if the Bears do hold, if McCarthy comes in and learns the offense pretty well. He was learning last year, and if he comes in and fills in for Sam Darnold, and we're comparing him to Sam Darnold at the end of the year last year, but he basically has to be better than Sam Darnold at the beginning of the year last year. And those were two different people, essentially. So it'll be interesting to watch that. I think you hit the nail on the head with Caleb Williams. I'm interested in that juxtaposition because I remember you telling me in a previous interview that and correct me if I'm wrong, the PFF stats are usually not very friendly to Goff, right? Do I have that right? That you told me that he's not exactly like a PFF analytics darling.
It depends on which stats you're looking at. Like, I think with respect to, if you look at straight up, the grading of efficiency on plays, the EPA per play, which I'd say is the classic in the analytics world, that I think is very friendly to Goff in just in terms of because the offense has been so efficient. When you start breaking down some of the, more, I would say, granular aspects of quarterbacking, whether that's, the big time throws and other things like that, that's where, because of, one, I would say, also I would say the types of aspects that relate to, extending plays out of the pocket and other things like that, we know aren't necessarily Goff's strong suit. He doesn't show up as strongly as, say, some of the other quarterbacks that, can maybe elevate another system where things aren't working as well. But I also think there's, I think at the end of the day, if you're a team that's competing for a Super Bowl, the system's going to be pretty good. And it's almost more important to make sure to have someone who can not just, execute the system, but execute it at the highest possible level than it is to have someone a Justin Herbert, who we know can maybe make a good team bad, but how much does he elevate, a bad team good, but how much can he make a good team great? And those are two different sort of questions that we have to think about when thinking about quarterbacks. And we've seen Goff on multiple occasions make a good team great. So I think that, yes, he doesn't show up the highest in some of, these things are going to isolate particular abilities that he may not have, but he is, absolutely enough to get the Lions to the promised land. At this point, and with this roster as stacked as it is.
I agree. The reason why I asked is I was kind of going to go into a bit of a comparison with Caleb Williams because I want to talk about the coaches, because one obviously went to the Bears and now is going to be coaching Caleb Williams, which I think a lot of people are looking at him and his potential and all of that, but he's also not had the experience and the accuracy and the ability to do the progressions and the reads like Goff has. He hasn't had as many years to try that. So they're looking at Ben Johnson coaching him, and then plus the rushing ability and the playmaking ability, and they're maybe making a false equivalency there. That'll be interesting. The other coordinator went to your team, so I want to talk about that. But it's been interesting to watch the Hendon Hooker versus Kyle Allen battle at camp, because Hooker is clearly a talented quarterback and he has a lot of potential and a lot of talent, but he just did not fit the ability to read that system and go through the progressions, whereas Allen has bombed out other places, doesn't necessarily maybe have the high-end skill, but he's probably a better fit to replace Goff, and I feel like that's kind of Goff in a nutshell. It's made me appreciate him more to a degree because, yeah, you don't have the flashiness. You're not going to do a behind-the-back pass like Patrick Mahomes, and that's kind of a one-of-one thing anyways, but he's going to run the offense efficiently, and like you said, he can be that quarterback to take him to the promised land. And so it's been interesting to watch that quarterback value battle and think of what it'll look like with Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson being paired up in Chicago.
Right. I mean, with Hooker, his release today, I think it kind of comes to too much of a shock, just with, what had been said by Campbell of Campbell sort of implied he didn't think there was a lot of development left there. He, especially also his performance this preseason when he had 5 turnovers and no touchdowns. It was the kind of thing where he pretty much lost himself sort of any benefit of the doubt he may have had with the team. But, he's going to hit waivers. He doesn't have 4 accrued seasons, so he's not going to be a straight-out release like, say, Skipper was. But they are going to, I would not be surprised if another team gives him a shot. But I think you're right. I think you hit the net. I think you said it exactly right. There's these quarterbacks, but especially those that come out of these gimmicky college offenses, like he did. it's just a little bit hard for them to like to develop all the tools to read an NFL defense and to process at the level they need to. And partially that's because that's not something that, is that easily coached. Like, I know, like, people always say the physical tools are uncoachable, but I mean, I think we've seen countless examples in the NFL of, teams reaching for athletic ability and quickly realizing that the Josh Allens of the world that develop the ability to also do the other things in terms of reading the field are really more the exceptions that prove the rule than they are like something that you can actually strive to achieve.
I agree. It is interesting to look at it from that perspective because it's kind of like analytics as a whole. You don't necessarily see all the through trends, but you can see different aspects that it's easier. It's more fun and easier to watch the flashy stuff, but that's not always what gets you there. So, but it's an interesting discussion here. I want to talk about the other coordinator because he went to your team, and I want to compare him to Johnson a little bit. But we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back with Jake Grossman. Stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Coming back here with Jake Grossman, talking a little Lions and maybe eventually a little Wolverines. We'll see. We're having a good discussion on the Lions. I wanted to talk about the juxtaposition of those coaches. Dan and I were talking about that a little bit in the break here because I think Dan kind of hit it on the head, and I was thinking about it the same way, that Johnson, it's like we have to make people one thing. And Johnson is the offensive mind. He's the wunderkind. He's the guy that thought of all the plays and maybe got too much credit as far as the pie chart goes for the offensive success. And then you've got Aaron Glenn on the other side. And there's a part of me that believes more in Glenn because he seems to have the culture piece down, and that's harder to teach. That's something that's more inherent in his personality, and I think he melded with Campbell there well through their days in New Orleans and then working together, even though he's got, I think, objectively a worse team to work with. No offense to your Jets. I think he's going to turn them around. I just think their roster at this time, partially because the whole Aaron Rodgers experience didn't really leave Glenn in a great position, but I think he's going to be able to turn that team around, and it's going to be interesting to watch the quarterback that was tossed away from the Bears and the other coordinator that left the Lions paired up against the two kind of wunderkins on the other side, the offensive coordinator that everybody wanted and the number one pick that everybody wanted. Now the number two pick has done very well in that draft, Jaden Daniels, and now we'll see what Williams does with Johnson, but I wouldn't sleep on your team, but I'm curious what you're seeing there with Jets and kind of the new regime.
Yeah, so we haven't had a chance to see either of them, fully do their head coaching yet. So, we only have what we have in terms of, evaluating them and thinking about them obviously from their coordinator experiences. But I did think there was they each had a quote this season that went viral in different ways that I thought was a perfect microcosm of who they are. And I guess stuck out to me as an analytics guy, where you had Ben Johnson talking about how the EPA in the passing game is one of the most critical factors in determining wins and losses. And then you had Aaron Glenn saying, who says it's a passing league? The team that won the Super Bowl, the Eagles, what were they in passing? 29th. I mean, that's also if you're using, total Ross, numbers, I think they were actually top 5 in drop. I think they were numbers, actually, they were top 10 rather in dropback EPA. And also, on defensive EPA on the dropbacks, they were, top 3. So I think it's one of those things where it's yeah, it's definitely a passing league. I do think Glenn was probably, saying enough there to just sort of maybe hide from the fact that maybe the quarterback for the Jets right now isn't so good at passing. But I do think it's also I do have a lot of confidence in Glenn. I do think the defense is still really strong. It obviously took a step back last year from its really strong performances the 2 prior years, but I would not be surprised to see, especially under Glenn with the miracles he was able to work with all the injuries last year in Detroit, if he was able to do a lot more with that defense. And then that offensive line, man, is serious. That is maybe one of the best units in football. I could see it's young, and there's it's not everyone's a household name or anything, but man, is that a good offensive line, and that's a great running back room with Brees and Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis. So I could really see, and then with how a rushing quarterback helps the running game, I could really see this Jets sort of relying on that run game, filtering the passing game mostly through Garrett Wilson, and actually being pretty competent this year. But at the same, and we'll see what Engstrom turns out to be. Obviously, having been under Ben Johnson all those years, but I don't know if I'd go as far to say that I would prefer to have Glenn right now than if we had been able to attract Ben Johnson. At the same time, there is a lot to feel good about with Glenn.
In some ways, I feel like Glenn's a better fit with that team. We'll have to see, but the New York attitude, I could just see him being a better fit. I do think ultimately they're both going to be good coaches. Johnson's going to have to figure out more the culture side, and he's got some people to do that. He's got Dennis Allen and other folks there to help him do that. Glenn's got the culture side figured out, I think, and so then Engstrand and some of the other people that he brought over and brought in will help with kind of the brain trust thing, especially on the offensive side. Obviously, he's a good schemer on the defensive side, but it'll be interesting to watch them against each other and as this Campbell coaching tree grows, see how they do in taking the culture there, because especially when it is a culture-based organization like, say, a Patriots, then it is tougher to lead into that. But I also think he empowers his staff too. But I appreciate you highlighting that a little bit. I want to talk. I know you graduated, but we got to talk a little Wolverines here. We did a little earlier in the show. I'm curious what you think about them leading into the year, because they're in kind of a strange position. It seems like everything depends on the quarterback this year, which I'm not used to that with Michigan. Obviously, it's going to be offensive line based, and there's going to be a lot that is going to be emphasized there as always. But I'm curious what your thoughts with the impending freshman QB and the team ranked at 14. Do you think that's too high or too low?
So I think 14 feels about right. Just like based on most of the projection systems I've looked at, they seem like a team that's going to be roughly like a 9-10 win team. You know, the defense has been projected pretty much across the board to be a top 5 unit, and that doesn't surprise me. Like whether you're looking at like SP Plus, FEI, Kelly Ford, some simulation-based models, like they all kind of say like Michigan, like, you know, if they get to 10 wins this year, this is going to be a team that's in the, like, you know, in the playoffs, and that's, you know, they're going to be scary once they get there. I think we saw last year that it's once you get in the playoffs, you know, it's if you've got a team, and also at that point, if Underwood has, you know, 10 already, like, you know, 12, 13 starts under the belt, like, he'll have experience. Like we could really do damage this year, and even like we can have championship aspirations. I don't think that's wrong to say. I mean, last year it was really just the entire team was held back by the passing offense. I mean, like we had a bottom 15. I think we were 123rd in the country in EPA per play on pass plays. Like that is just unsustainable and completely a product of the quarterback position. Like, yes, our wide receivers obviously struggled. I don't think we had anyone with even 300 yards. And this year, you know, we've definitely lost a lot of the talent from last year. You know, Graham, Grant, Loveland, Josiah Stewart, Will Johnson. But we have all the staff back. It does seem like, you know, a competent starter can kind of fix everything. And everything we've heard about Underwood is that he doesn't seem like he's going to make a lot of those typical true freshman mistakes. He seems like he wants to play under control in the timing of the offense. I mean, I've heard he has like struggled a little bit with some deep ball accuracy, but besides that, I mean, it sounds like we're getting another version of at least like what we got out of J.J. McCarthy all those years. So it does seem possible that we can be really competitive and quickly. I mean, the running back room looks great with Marshall and Haynes. We got to hope that Donovan McCulley and Marlon Klein become like real options, but I do think we have like a real offense this year. And then I think there's a lot to feel good about with the defense as well, with, you know, Moore and Guy, with Benny, with, you know, Jair Hill. Like I think this could be a really dangerous team, especially if Rod Moore comes back healthy and can play. This could be fun.
That's probably the most positive summary I've had for the Wolverines on the show. I feel like normally when I have people on the show in a good way, because I think you broke it down well, but it seems like whenever we talk about the Wolverines on the show, it always ends up going into the allegations and I mean, although that's news and all of that, they're still going to have to play through that. They've got a good coaching staff. They've got guys that are going to be able to fill in. That I think they'll be able to keep the team focused. And it is an exciting team to watch, especially at the quarterback position, because I'm an Indiana guy, went to Indiana University. Last year was such a bizarro year for me because we were good at football inexplicably, and that was weird to take all year. And Michigan had our quarterback that we sent away in Jack Tuttle, and that seemed to be the best option for a little while, which was very weird. And so it's nice to see them reload for the Wolverines fans here. And although they probably have a young team, they have lost a lot of coaches and a lot of players over the last couple years. And there's no getting around that. But they also have a tendency to reload. And that coaching staff is pretty strong. So hopefully within the fact that they've got that core, that means that even though there's a lot of new players, they've still got a core of veterans, a lot of whom you listed from last year. And then I think that's a strong coaching staff here that's going to be able to power them forward.
Yeah, the transfers also look great. I mean, Justice Haynes averaged 5.6 yards per carry in the SEC last season. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if, Michigan's had a backfield split the last few years, and it's been kind of 50% for one guy, 25% for another. I wouldn't be surprised if, Haynes ends up starting in the lesser role and then ends up being the predominant back by the end of the season, kind of like Mullings last year, where he just sort of earns it because he seems like a really awesome talent. Also, as an Indiana guy, I'm wondering, the Donovan McCulley situation from last year kind of struck me as weird because I really hope he can sort of get back to that 2023 form, and I guess it was a really crowded receiver room last year. I will say I'm also a Fernando Mendoza believer, so I am excited to see how he performs this season. But we only got explosive plays out of our receivers 11% of the time last season. I think we actually had 0 explosive plays in the passing game out of our running back. So if we can just get a little bit more of the explosive plays, which are honestly subject to a lot of variance and just these athletic players making plays, I really think we can see a lot out of this team. I also think Klein can really step into Loveland's role and do it. I mean, he actually he tested as a better athlete in almost every respect as Loveland, but he can also kind of block like a real offensive lineman. He could really also help set the offense apart. I happen to be really optimistic about where Michigan is because I think sort of just looking at the roster and the numbers. I mean, this is a team that has been given somewhere between a 33% chance to a 50% chance of making the playoff. This is not a team to be, sort of wallowing about. I think this is a team to be excited about.
The Big Ten is going to be interesting this year. I think there's a lot of possibilities, so it's gonna be interesting to watch. And Michigan's certainly one of the variables in there. But I appreciate you coming on the show and covering a little Wolverines and Lions with us and bouncing around here. It's a good conversation. We'll look forward to having you back on, and we'll keep an eye out on the podcast. But tell people where they can follow you here.
Yeah. Find me on X at JGrossman0. I post a lot there, retweet a lot of other great analytics work of other people I follow and support. And it's always an honor coming on the show. I always love talking football with you guys. And hopefully I'll be back soon.
Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh is brought to you by Mary Freebed, Collectible Insurance Services, West Michigan Eye Care Associates, Eric Hall, DDS, Calder Financial Group, Grand Management, Rydan Investments, JH Realty Partners, and Encore Business Group. Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh airs live Monday nights, 7 p.m. Eastern on Jethro.fm.
Stay informed and stay vigilant.